So, if people can take their seats, I'm ready to take the first point question. And we've got lots of the panelists here still, so you can address the question at them if you wish. Otherwise, just a general thing, and I'll maybe ask people to respond. So who wants to go first?
Yeah, I know you're sick of the sound of me, but never mind. I think the overriding impression that I'm getting from everything that's been said is that the good ship, credit and consent has left the harbour. It left the harbour years ago, and it's not coming back. In terms of existing product, we are not going to get credit and consent. We're simply not. So we have to concentrate on getting compensation for the artists who created the existing content, which is everything. Let's face it, you know, all that music that's out there, everything you've ever listened to, everything we've all ever listened to is being scraped. It's all being used. So it would be an impossibility to actually get credit and consent from all those artists and authors. It's just not going to happen. And we have to be realistic about this. So in respect of existing product that's been used by AI, we need a levy. We need money. We need money to come in to be distributed through a collecting society. We want to keep it as simple as possible. For product going forward, for new artists, for new writers, then credit and consent will be essential. That's what we need to be negotiating. We need to be negotiating a levy for the music that's been used already, and we need to be negotiating some way that we can secure credit where consent is given for music that is scraped going forward. And there has to be a division of the money collected from these companies so that existing artists who no longer record anymore but whose works have all been used, are compensated. But also we need to make sure that the industry stays attractive enough and financially viable enough for new artists and writers. So some of that money has got to go in investing in schemes and ways in which we can encourage new artists to continue to make great music, because otherwise all we're going to hear is this awful plastic music.
Thank you, Horace. Benoit.
Yes, about the distribution of the levy, if a levy is ever collected. There was the proposal to base the distribution of them on the market share, and I think it's probably a valid option. But training is not based on market share. Training is based on everything available on the internet since the first recording came into being. So it doesn't make much sense to consider that market share is the natural and obvious solution. So maybe we should think a little bit more, and maybe it's the only option, reasonable option, but I don't think it's an obvious one. And then because the main problem with the output is that it competes with human creations. It put at risk all the artists, current and future artists. And if you say we're going to distribute only to the right holders that already exist on the market, then what's going to happen with the young artists, future creators? So I think it's crucial that whatever we collect from a levy on the output, a significant proportion of this is dedicated to support to the sector, new creations, new artists, etc. Otherwise, we're just going to witness the shrinking of the sector, and competition will not be favorable to what will be left of the sector. We need to encourage future creators.
Thank you, Benoit. So just to be clear on that, if we're talking about a levy on what's already been scraped, which is just about everything, so that boat has sailed long ago and we've been talking about it, would that be a kind of collective blanket levy that would somehow, we'd have to talk about how to use it, or would we try and find a method of distributing it to the people that CMOs represent, which sounds pretty difficult to me? Do you want to respond, or does anybody else want to comment on that? Laurent.
Just to continue with what has been said just for the moment, I shared many ideas that had been expressed by the panelists, and I'm sure that the CMOs will have a key role, you know, in the question. But I think we must have a regulation that would finally have indirect effect that could you know, encourage, you know, continue to produce more and more generative AI products. Benoit said we must orientate some of the money collected, you know, to give some help and some incentive, you know, to have creative human creativity. It's very important because we could have a system when you create AI, generative AI, and your performers have remuneration, so we can go on, and all is okay. We must be keep in mind we need human creativity and human performers and so on. It's very important.
Yeah. Thank you, Laurent. Do you want to come back on that, Horace? I mean, I know you were thinking about it.
I think somebody said it today. Something akin to the private copying levy is the only way I think it will work. But, you know, we need to make sure that it is a substantial amount of money because, as Tino just said, leaning across to me, otherwise it's just going to be pennies to people, and that's not going to make a difference. And also, we want it not just to make a difference for performers. We want it to be something that persuades those companies not to use AI because it's too expensive to do it. You know, so it should be a disincentive to use AI so that we can get back to real music again.
And perhaps building on Laurent's point, that we can develop young artists, we can actually give opportunities for them to perform, and yes, and see what the AI companies do about that. Chris is next.
Just along those lines, I would just point out that because of all the scraping that has occurred already, bearing in mind that once it's scraped, it's in, and it's going into model weights, it's going into, let's just call it memory, long-term memory of the machine, that benefit is going to keep accruing to the AI forever. So I think that's justification, you know, to keep in mind. And there's a paper at Oxford, and don't ask me to tell you the formula off the top of my head, but it's called the windfall clause. I don't know if anyone's heard of this or not, but this is something that I think OpenAI actually has sort of indicated they were going to adopt, and it's a very specific EBITDA type accounting calculation about how much the growth in market valuation of the AI company is attributable to certain inputs, right? And how much is supernormal because of unusual valuation attributed to AI in general, and so on. And it might be something to take a look at if you're trying to come up with that levy concept, right? Where you're coming up with a number. Because it's that's really kind of the street they're going down with this windfall clause idea. And if you want, I can find it.
That would be very useful, Chris. Thank you for that. So we're thinking of a levy, but year on year, it growing in relation to the profits made by the companies. Who knows? Just as Horace said, a big levy just as a disincentive. Beat.
Yeah, and just because of the fact that the AI business is controlled by two countries at the time, China and the United States of America, should not lead us to be thinking that this levy should only be to the benefit of the musicians of North America and Europe. Because everything, the whole music of the whole world is being scraped, whether we hear it or whether we don't hear it, but that's quite sure, I believe. So we have to find a system that could also benefit artists, performers in countries where there may not even be a collecting society at this point. Or there may not be a musicians' union to support something like that. or there may not be a favorable legislation in that respect. And Brazil is leading away, but there are many, many other countries in Africa, in Latin America, in Asia, that are at this point probably standing on the sidelines and not being included in anything.
And while you hand the mic over to Tino, I come from a country that's very anti-levies. And there's no levies, they're hostile to the very conception. So we've got to have a method of introducing this across the world and administering it. So there's a challenge. Tino.
Right, the devil's in the details, because it's going to have to be something that's going to be static throughout the globe. I can't speak for China, but, and I understand the bashing of the United States right now. I do it myself. But understand that the CMOs that would be handling that in the United States do distribute globally. So it wouldn't be limited to North America. And I just want to make sure that nobody assumes that would be the case.
Yeah, and we'd need to have long discussions and make sure that we know how it can work. Okay, anybody else with another point?
Thank you, Christophe, Managing Director of Playwright CMO for Performing Artists Belgium. I heard a couple of speakers earlier today refer to music free of rights. And we've known that situation for quite some time. It's now getting more and more a problem. We had a couple of weeks ago the message from large supermarket chains in Belgium that they are increasingly using AI-created music. So we're talking about a whole other dimension here, but the problem isn't new to us. We've been dealing with music free of rights since more than 10, 15, 20 years. And there are solutions there. There are solutions in this sense that a number of countries have developed policies, have developed sales, marketing and communication strategies that benefit human-made music, that benefit music for which we can collect. And that's certainly the case for copyright CMOs. I've been to various countries who have a lot of experience with that. Just to give you one example, in one country, when they started the CMOs speaking about the use of music in a very positive way, in a way that it is not perceived as a tax, they had an uptick in their income of 16%. So it is very valuable. I know of other countries that have managed to turn around this tendency to invest in AI-created music, in music free of rights. So there are definitely things that we can do without waiting to get some help by a legislator. So I wanted to point out that this truly exists, this kind of experience. Not only legislative solutions, but also, let's say, more commercial solutions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Who's next would like to make a point? Sorry, Sanjay.
This has been a great investment of 3 days, and I would like to congratulate the sponsors, the participants, and the organizers who have really put in the best show, and you blew us away with these 3 things. And I'm really happy that all of us have really discussed a lot and churned out a lot of ideas. Now we have to harvest these ideas and put it into action. And that will be basically, then that will be the real value we can take out of this conference and 3 days that we have invested. I wish you all the best, and I'm always available whenever you want in this journey ahead. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sanjay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I just want to put it in another direction. We have talked about protecting the performing artists, and in Denmark right now, besides this TDM challenge, we have had success by being in a dialogue with the cultural minister, actually with the whole parliament, and it has resulted in a new bill that has been submitted on July 7. It's providing provisions in the Danish Copyright Act, and actually there are 3 main how can you say, titles about this. The deepfake protection will be implemented in the Danish copyright law. And besides that, there will be a general protection against realistic digitally generated imitations of personal characteristics. And that will protect all individuals from the sharing of realistic digitally generated imitations of their personal characteristics, such as appearance, voice, etc., without their consent. And then I jumped over the important one for us in the artist world. There will be an imitation protection for performing artists. And this protection will protect performing artists from the sharing of realistic digitally generated imitations of their artistic performances without their consent. And that may relate to the thing we just heard about Eric Clapton, you know, this prompting technique as asking for something in the style of a specific artist. This may help to protect an artistic expression. So these provisions are quite important for the performing artists. And we are very willing to share. It has been established by a collaboration with the Danish Musicians Union, Danish Artists Union, and Danish Actors Union, 3 trade organizations. And then we've been into a dialogue with the politician. It has been very constructive. There's a big majority in the parliament who will actually vote these provisions into the copyright law in February. So we are quite happy about this, but of course it's only in Denmark, so of course we would like to export it to the European Union as well. Right now we hold the chairmanship of the European Union, and our cultural minister has been very active promoting these provisions. Actually, we had a conference in Copenhagen 2 weeks ago where people from the European Union and organizations from all over Europe has been invited to discuss these matters. And of course, depending on which country we're talking about, there can be challenges, of course, in the legislation in the different countries. But I think that we all agree that we have challenges for the performing artists, and that's what we protect in Denmark.
Thank you, Thomas. That's very interesting. So maybe we can look from the point of view who people are going to take this music, the consumers. We've touched upon the consumers a little bit, but we haven't really decided how are we going to win them over. Because if there's a levy, if there's any kind of payment, they're the ones who are going to pay, because you know the companies will pass it on. They'll pass on in the price. So what do we do about the consumers? What do we do about getting the consumers to a groundswell of public opinion against AI music, for a start, because there may not be? And what do we do about a groundswell of public opinion to support us as a sector and have to pay a little bit more if they know that sector's supported? Irene.
I think this conversation is something that goes completely connected with the protection of natural resources. And coming from a country that we are very conservationist, I think this is a very important point, because at the end, it would be great that the demand of the audience demanded a corporation that's a green artificial intelligence corporation, for example, which is more balanced for natural resources, and even not only protecting the natural resources, but protecting the arts, the craftsmen of people, you know, the culture of how things have been made in artists and humanity for many, many years. And I think the key is the new generations. There's so many things that the new generations change. And we've seen it. Some years ago, there was not an awareness of healthy food, for example, or even conservation or climate change. Things like people only used sugar. Now you have to be so careful with sugar, candy, and children. So the awareness of our society now and the people from the future, I think one of the panelists said, you know, what the audience has to be the one that shifts the competition, and we are the ones that have to, in a way, make that awareness happen, connected with these other things.
Thank you, Irene. Horace, you want to come back?
I think, as far as consumers are concerned, I think there is a parallel with campaigns that we've all run to get recorded music removed from theatre, that kind of thing. And the responses that have been from musical theatre lovers in London have been great. You know, they really have kicked back against productions that have tried to incorporate or use recorded music instead of live musicians. We had a long-standing campaign against the producers of the production Warhorse because they dismissed the musicians and used a recording. And we had so much support from the public on that. And the eventual settlement that we got from the producers for the musicians was a record in our union. And I'm very proud to have been General Secretary at that time. So I think we do sell it to the public in the same way as we have done for recorded music in theatre, which is, you say, first of all, you're being cheated. You know, you are being ripped off because this isn't proper music, what you're buying here or what you're paying for. And secondly, it's putting musicians out of work. And if you love music, you'll want musicians to be able to economically survive. And this music threatens the whole ecosystem for musicians. I don't even want to call it music. This strange machine productions does threaten the ecosystem that musicians rely so heavily upon. So it's about campaigns, and it's about vigorous campaigning, and it's about unions and collecting societies investing a bit of money in those campaigns and reaching out to the public and saying, reject this, reject it, it's not good, you're being cheated, and it's putting musicians out of work.
Thank you, Horace. Another thing that was brought up today that maybe we could explore a little bit more are moral rights. And my expertise is moral rights of performers, and I know that we can talk about the songwriters and composers' moral rights, which are stronger, but they're not very good anyway. Performers' moral rights, we kind of just let through, that we kind of enacted it into national laws, never really followed it up because they didn't mean anything, they were waived immediately. But as soon as the kind of AI issue became very public and we started to talk about it maybe a couple of years ago, one of my first instincts was we need to work and we need to get back to moral rights and strengthen them. Both of the moral rights, the right of identity, really important. I mean, that is a fantastic right for so many payments, on payments, royalty payments, things that come, the secondary payments. But the right of integrity for performers means nothing. It just means if your performance is distorted in some way electronically, then you can complain. But if they use it in a product that you disapprove of, whereas I think the composers have a moral right there, we can't, the performers can't. They're very limited. But if we actually develop moral rights, rework on moral rights, and actually get people to understand what moral rights are, non-economic rights, so that we actually can get the performers recognized, then we can build on a payment system. Any comments on that? Or should we let it lie and work on it in our own unions and CMOs? Johan.
Johan from APOLLON. I'm a big fan of the moral rights too, but there's a danger in using them for economic purposes, because the model of a moral right is in copyright and related rights, you have the two. You have your economic rights and you have your moral rights, and they're separate because they're not supposed to serve an economic purpose, because they can lead to money, but that is never a remuneration. That's always damages. I mean, so the money connected to moral rights is a damage payment. So, and that is not a good basis to build an economic model. So I love them to stop things, and that's what they're built for, to show limits of what you can accept as an artist, whether that is as an author or as a performer, but they're not developed to serve as a basis for any economic model.
If we had a blank sheet of paper and started again, would they? And if we wanted to talk about a moral right now and redevelop them, could that work? Just putting that out there. It's not likely to happen. Thank you. Can we have the microphone, please, over here?
Thank you very much. Mr. President, my name is Tassos Katopodis from the Hellenic Entertainment Federation. I think that the people is always with us, but we have to show to all of them the difference. We speak about signing for the products of AI, but of course, we can sign our music and our song that are not made by AI and show the difference. We need laws, yes, we need laws, but we need a better art education for our children. We have to press the governments and make laws for our music, for our rights. We have a good weapon, our live music, our concerts, and our civilization that is proved from our live appearance and our live music. About the neighbor rights, I said the first day, and I am very glad that Mr. Maragudakis says the same about the distribution between producers, musicians, singers. Equal share for all the parts. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Any other points from the floor?
Thank you very much. My name is Nikos Panagiotidis. I'm a musician and professor for life. First of all, I really wish to compliment the organizers of this conference, which was excellent in every way, and not just on the procedural stuff, the paraphernalia, but also as far as the speakers are concerned and the no-nonsense conversations that we had, which was really great. Now, the only thing I wanted to add has to do with this perspective of people's awareness, the audience awareness, which is, I think, very, very important. It has been said during those few days that sometimes the audience doesn't really care whether they listen to, for example, AI music or music made by humans. I don't know to what extent that is true, but to any extent that it might be, it is really up to us to try and build the public awareness so that they actually prefer to listen to human-made music rather than artificially made music. And that can be done in many ways. Of course, as Horace said, it has to do with the union's pressure and all that, but it has to do with also pressuring the governments to take care to the education, not in the narrow sense of the educational system, but the general cultural environment that has to do with creating audiences more knowledgeable and more willing to actually go for that preference that will protect not just our profession, but our cultural environment as a whole. So it has to do not only with protecting, the rights, the economical or the professional stuff, but also producing better environment for the society itself. So I think that it all boils down to political will and the need to help the education and the cultural environment for the people. And that will create a better environment for everything else that we, and of course the more experts, the lawyers and all that, will have to create as legislation or whatever other means. So that was my, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much for that. Right, anybody else? Anybody else want to contribute to this?
Thank you so much, John, for giving me the word, and thank you everyone here. Actually, it's been a fantastic conference, a lot of very important comments, insights, so thank you for having me here, and on behalf of Spotify, it's really, really appreciated. I wanted to leave a thought, perhaps going back to the first day of the discussions, for something that I hope we all agree on, which is that music has real value, which is not just cultural, not just moral, but also commercial. And I think there have been some critical comments to the tune that, oh, we've saved the music industry already and this game is over. We haven't. The road is still long, and I just looked at the numbers of how many people in the world currently are paying for music. And if you look at Spotify figures, we have about 8.5% of the world's population on our service, and we're not even in China or Russia, which is great. But there are some other services who have more music users. And also we have managed to persuade 3% of the world's population to be paying for music. Is that a lot? To us it is, but there is still a long way to go. And I really hope we will be able to zoom out sometimes and focus on this, but as a sector, we still have a way to go to persuade more consumers around the world to pay for legal access to music, and it's really that basic. So while we're having a lot of discussions on very valid topics and very valid concerns for the future and how to divide the money pie, let's not forget the fact that the consumer is key here. Ultimately, any money that goes back to the music sector has to come from the consumer. So let's not lose sight of their needs, and some of the consumers will want to explore new technologies. We want to do it with the music industry's consent, credit and compensation. We've made it as much clear. We don't have a particular product to put out for it yet, but let's listen to the consumer, and I think the music industry and sector as a whole wins when creators and consumers' incentives and interests are aligned. But thank you so much for having us here.
Thank you, Xenia. Thank you for coming, and thank you for your contribution. I think my message to you all is to take what's happened in the last 3 days. Don't forget the streaming debate. Take it back to your organisations, your unions, your CMOs, discuss it internally. Let's try and pull together one policy for our industry, a worldwide policy that we can actually talk to individual governments about. Some governments are going to be very hostile to whatever we say. Some governments might be more favourable to what we're looking for. But we have to do this as a worldwide body, and we have to do this through our, as I say, our CMOs and through our unions, and FIM has been working on this for a while. It's very difficult to put some conclusions together. We've all got various ideas, we've got all this information swimming around in our heads. I think what's going to happen is that the working group that put together the program for this conference, we'll have a meeting in a few days' time, and we'll put together not so much conclusions, but a statement. Because I don't think we can conclude this. This is ongoing. This is going to probably change next month. And we'll put a statement out for you all to issue for your organisations. And I'll certainly speak with our friends at APOLLON, and we'll actually put some thought to that. And any ideas, please feed it through. Let FIM know, let APOLLON know, and we'll take that forwards. Often in these situations, we have something already written and we put it on the screen, but with this one, that's a bit tricky at the moment. So leave that with us, and we'll put something which we hope you'll be able to use in your own territories with your own governments and your own organisations and your own music industry. So thanks to give now, and our thanks have to go to APOLLON for their generosity, for So let me get this right. Efaristo to everyone at APOLLON, to the Secretariat who've looked after us and been there here, all of the staff that have worked on this conference, certainly to Gregoris and Dinos and the board for the generosity for making this happen. And it's been a tremendous thing. And as I said in the opening, this is the first formal cooperation between FIM and APOLLON, and hopefully not the last. We can build on this. It's been an incredible experience. I know you've all enjoyed it. Thanks to the keynote speakers. We've had some really good speeches, been excellent. I know that we've had a lot of PowerPoint slides, and we've had some videos. Now, they're going to be made available to everybody. Dinos is going to maybe drip feed them out to everybody that has attended here. And certainly use those again with your organisations, and use them as a basis for discussion when you get back home, so we can actually all pull on this issue together, these very important issues. Thank you to the panelists. Some really, really good panels. The depth of knowledge is incredible. And when we call upon our own community to actually come forward and come together on these issues, it sometimes staggers me how high, or the high level of debates we have. And it's been like that for the last 3 days. I'm really impressed and really pleased that we had that. Thank you to everybody that joined online. I know we've had a lot of people. Dinos told me earlier today it was about 600. I know we were having 800 yesterday, and then we started with 1,000, so it's around that figure. That's pretty amazing. That is incredible. So thank you for that, and the same goes for you. Hopefully we can get the information. It'll be available on either the FIM website or the APOLLON website that you can use for your organisations and the people that you're in contact with. Thank you to you and your organisations for sending you. I mean, this has been a really active conference. Everybody's been involved. Everybody's given me great feedback as we go, and it's really pleasing that, that you all seem to have enjoyed it so much. Thank you to the interpreters. It's a real job. We know that we get excited and talk too fast sometimes, and we know that we get quite technical, and it's fantastic that you've hung on to that, and it's been brilliant to guide us through the conference like that. So, I'm going to hand over now to Grigoris to formally declare the conference closed, and he's got something, as you can see, in front of me. So it's been a real pleasure for me. I've chaired quite a few conferences on behalf of FIM. This has been one of the best ones, one of the best experiences. And hope to socialise with you tomorrow on the boat and see you again at another FIM conference. So, Grigoris, please.